What's up, guys? Today we're looking at the UFC pound for pound rankings, and I've got some issues with the way they've got this lined up. I don't agree with most of the pound for pound rankings. I agree most of the fighters deserve to be here in the list. I am going to cut a couple, but I don't agree with the order. So today I want to come on here and fix the pound for pound list and give you the real pound for pound list. And yeah, who should be in the top 15, who shouldn't, and what order should they be in. So with that being said, let's get right into it. Starting off at number 15. Number 15 pound for pound fighter, in my opinion, is Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland, definitely in the top 15. But at the end of the day, whenever this guy won the belt against Izzy, let's not pretend like Izzy's not on a 3-fight losing streak now. He was on a He is coming off a 1 win against Alex Pereira whenever Sean Strickland beat him, but now he's on a 3-fight losing streak. So that win didn't exactly age well. Sean Strickland lost to DDP. He also lost to Nasruddin Imavov. He has a loss against Alex Pereira. So he has some losses in the last 3 years. I think he has 3 losses. So Sean Strickland slides in at the number 15 spot. Maybe if he beats Dricus, he can move up to number 10 again. But as of now, for me, he is going to be number 15 just because, especially since the way he looked in that Paulo Costa fight, I didn't see, it wasn't too impressive, man. I mean, we're talking about Paulo Costa, who's 1-4 in his last 5, and his last win was in 2022 against Luke Rockhold, who is now retired and is 40 years old, and he couldn't even finish Luke Rockhold. So the fact that Sean Strickland pitter-pattered his way to a split decision over Paulo Costa, I can't really put him that high, man, because if you're going to be higher than number 15 in the pound-for-pound rankings, you need to be destroying a guy like Paulo Costa. But Sean Strickland's still good. He dominated Israel Adesanya. He went to war with Dricus and almost took the fight. So I do have to have Sean Strickland at my number 15 spot. Coming in at the number 14 spot, I'm going to have Maximus Holloway. Now, Max Holloway is number 14 in the pound-for-pound rankings. He's only lost to the best of the best. I mean, his 3 losses that he has in the last 10 years are to Dustin Poirier, Volkanovski, and to Ilia Topuria. That's all he's lost to, which are literally top fighters of the division. I mean, Ilia Topuria is number 2 in my opinion, pound for pound. Volkanovski was number 1 pound for pound at the time whenever he beat Max Holloway the 3rd time. So Max Holloway, although he's losing to only the absolute best of the best. Anytime it's not a top guy like a Topuria or a Volkanovski or a Dustin Poirier, Max Holloway destroys him. I mean, this guy has only lost to Volkanovski recently and now Topuria, but before that, he was beating up guys like Yair Rodriguez. He was beating up guys like Arnold Allen. Went up a weight class to Justin Gaethje, and that narrative in that fight was he was going to get destroyed. Destroyed Justin Gaethje. Even hung in there with Ilia until he got KO'd in the 3rd. He was doing well. I think Ilia was up on the cards, but Max Holloway, I still think, deserves to be in the pound-for-pound rankings despite coming off a knockout loss. The level of competition this guy's faced and how long he's been able to hang around the top. Yeah, I think he deserves that number 14 spot. Just slightly above Strickland, but if Strickland wins, I wouldn't mind putting him over Holloway. But for now, for me personally, I have Max Holloway as the number 14 spot. Coming right above Holloway, I'm going to have Alexander Volkanovski. Alexander Volkanovski at the 13. Now, this is crazy to say, considering that at one point, Alexander Volkanovski was number 1. Even whenever he lost to Islam the first time, he stayed number 1 in the pound-for-pound rankings because the fight was so close. And you could argue Volk won, so they were like, well, Islam won, but we're going to keep Volk pound for pound number 1 because he went up a weight class and nearly beat him. But since then, he slid down. He's now 1-3 in his last 4, so obviously he's going to drop all the way from number 1 down to number 13 for me. I have Volk at 13. Just, he hasn't won a fight in quite some time. I think his last one was Yair Rodriguez. He's on a 2-fight KO loss streak to Ilia Topuria and Islam Makhachev. KO'd in both of those fights. He hasn't fought in over a year. And yeah, man, it's been a while since Volk got a win. He's 36 now, but I still have him in my pound-for-pound list because the cut of work he did when he was at the top cannot be understated how impressive it was. And he does have 3 wins over Max Holloway. That's why I have him above Max Holloway currently. They both are coming off losses, but I'd say Volk in the pound-for-pound list, even though he hasn't won in a while, he still slightly edges Holloway just due to the work he put in, the 5 title defenses, almost beating Islam, and stuff like that. His accomplishments are surpass Holloway by far, and I still think in a fight today he probably stylistically would beat Holloway because it's not like Holloway has one-punch knockout power. He showed it against Gaethje, but typically, unless Max sits down on the shots, I think Volk can beat him again in the 4th fight. So yeah, Volkanovski at the number 13 spot for me. Let's move it on to the number 12 spot. I'm going to have Charles Oliveira du Bronx. Charles Oliveira coming off that win over Michael Chandler, but the reason I have Charles Oliveira over Volkanovski is because he's in a better position. He's not coming off of 2 KO losses. He's coming off a win. And in the last, 5 years, Charles Oliveira has only lost to Islam Makhachev and Arman Tsarukyan, who just so happened to be the best 2 fighters in his entire weight class. And he almost beat Arman Tsarukyan. And Islam Makhachev is the pound-for-pound number 1 fighter in the world. Whenever Charles, the amount of work he put in, coming up the rankings, what was it, an 11-fight win streak with 10 finishes. Only guy he couldn't finish was Tony Ferguson. Absolutely insane. Captured the belt whenever he beat Chandler the first time. Then he defended it twice against Gaethje and Poirier. So Charles Oliveira 100% is still in the pound-for-pound ranking. Sure, he has that loss to Arman Tsarukyan and Islam, but that fight with Arman was so close. And if you value submissions, some people thought he won that fight. I thought he lost because he didn't do nothing in the striking. You can't just win fights off of just a couple submission attempts. But either way, it's an extremely close fight, and he's still number 2 in his division. And he still showed that he has very well-rounded skills, showing to be a smarter fighter these days. So being that he's coming off a win and he's not as much of a downslide as Volkanovski is. Volkanovski is 1-4 in his last 5, whereas Charles is 3-2 in his last 5 or something like that. 2-2 in his last 4, I mean. So, yeah, slightly above Volkanovski, in my opinion, just because the current state of their careers. And, yeah, man, I think there's a chance Charles Oliveira can possibly get the belt back against Islam. It's very slim, but I don't think Volkanovski has a chance to beat Topuria. So, I'll look at that as well. Let's get on to the number 11 spot. I have Arman Tsarukyan, speaking of him, at the number 11 spot. And I'd say that edging that went out over Charles Oliveira gained him right into that number 11 spot for me. Very underrated pick, in my opinion. The official UFC rankings do not have Arman Tsarukyan in the top 15 pound-for-pound list, but, I mean, this guy has solid wins. I mean, he has a win over, who is it? Joe Alvarez, who's on a 6-fight win streak. That's a good, underrated win. He has that win over, number 9, Beneil Dariush, who he knocked out cold. He has a win over Charles Oliveira, who he out-grappled and outstruck. He has a win over Joaquin Silva, doesn't do too much. He had a pretty good fight with Islam Makhachev back in the day. Sure, his quality of wins maybe aren't the best. I mean, Oliveira and Dariush are his 2 best wins, but this guy's skills cannot be understated. He probably has the best chance. He does have the best chance at anybody at lightweight to match Islam in the wrestling department and actually give him a tough run for his money. And the fact that he only has 2 losses in the UFC, you can argue only 1 loss to Islam because I 100% think he won that Gamrot fight. So, yeah. I have Arman Tsarukyan right over Charles Oliveira. You could maybe switch Arman and Oliveira, but the fact that Arman has a win over Oliveira is why I notch him just above him. So, yeah, Arman Tsarukyan at the number 11 spot. And this next one, a lot of people aren't going to like this one, but I have Khamzat Chimaev at the number 10 spot. Yes, one of the most dominant first-round fighters we've ever seen in the history of the sport. Maybe arguably the most dominant first-round fighter ever. Look what he did to Kamaru Usman. Who does that to Usman in the first round? Sure, he couldn't get the submission, but the way he took Kamaru Usman's back and just bullied him to a 10-8 round in the first round, absolutely insane. The way he just out-grappled the best anti-wrestler in middleweight history in Robert Whittaker, took him down with ease, and squeezed his face until his teeth broke out of place. I know his teeth were having issues, but still, that was amazingly impressive. And, yeah, man, his dominance on top of now he has good wins in 2 divisions. He beat a prime Gilbert Burns. It was a scrap, but he won that fight, knocked down Gilbert Burns, and just showed to be the better fighter. Showed decent cardio in that fight. I know a lot of people like to talk about how he gassed out and say he has a suspect gas tank, but he actually looked really good in the 3rd round in that fight. He didn't look too bad. He was tired, of course, but he looked decent. Like I said, beat up Kamaru Usman, but you can argue that fight was a draw, fair enough. But what he did to Usman in the first round cannot be understated. Completely ran through Robert Whittaker. Completely ran through Li Jingliang. Ran through Kevin Holland. It's like, Khamzat Chimaev, although he doesn't have the craziest strength of wins, just alone having a win over Usman and Robert Whittaker is extremely impressive. And the dominance he showed in the Usman fight in round 1 and just across the board in the whole Whittaker fight cannot be understated. And he's also undefeated. He's never lost. He's been ranked in 2 divisions. I have Khamzat Chimaev in my top 10 pound for pound. Hate him or love him, he is good. He has probably the best wrestling in the UFC right now. The most dominant for sure. So, yeah, Khamzat Chimaev capping in at my number 10 spot. Coming in at number 9. Controversial, I know. Go ahead and click off the video. Go ahead and run to the comments. Jon Jones at number 9. Oh my God, dude. If Dana White watches this video, you know he's crashing out immediately. Jon Jones at number 9. Listen, I know it seems crazy, but when you put it into context, I'm talking about the current version of Jon Jones. He has 2 wins in the last 5 years. Since 2020, Jon Jones has 2 wins against Cyril Gane and against Stipe Miocic. I don't even count the Stipe win. That barely does anything for his legacy. Like, you know, and the fact that this guy is inactive, he looks slower than ever in his fight against Stipe, even getting clipped at one moment with an uppercut by a 42-year-old Stipe. Not rocked, just kind of caught on the chin pretty good. And yeah, sure, he beat Cyril Gane dominantly, but it's like outside of that, man, I can't put Jon Jones any higher. Just his recent strength of schedule, Reyes, Anthony Smith, Santos are his last 3 fights at light heavyweight, and then Gane and a 42-year-old Stipe. The level of competition he's beat recently is just not up to par what it used to be, and he doesn't look as great as it used to look. He's obviously slowed down a lot. He looks very slow and plotty at heavyweight. Still dynamic and creative and has 5 fight IQ, but for me, just the inactivity, the level of competition, the ducking Tom Aspinall, I have Jon Jones all the way down at number 9. Like it, hate it or like it, man. It's my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments about this one, because I know this is going to be probably the hottest take of the entire video, because I have the one and only, the GOAT. Nobody remembers his name. Belal Muhammad at the 8 spot. Listen, Belal Muhammad took the belt off of Leon Edwards, dunked him on his head. I wouldn't say dominated him for 5 rounds, because I think you can argue it was a 48-47. Leon was raining down elbows, cut him open at the end of the fight. And Leon also stole one of the rounds where he has Belal's back. But Belal did pressure Leon Edwards and out-grapple him a majority of the fight with a lot of control time, which is what he is. Belal's a decision merchant. You guys know I'm not a big fan of Belal's style, but I cannot deny that he's gotten good wins after good wins. He got a good win over Leon Edwards, took the belt from him, who was on like a 11 or 12 unbeaten streak. And then he had a win over Wonderboy. He had a win over Gilbert Burns. He had a win over Vicente Luque. He has some good wins. I can't remember his other wins, but he has a TKO over Sean Brady, which is aging well. So yeah, Belal Muhammad facing better competition than Jon Jones, comfortably winning almost all of his fights. I mean, you can't really look at any of Belal's like recent fights and say like he almost got beat, you know? Although he's not like completely blowing guys out of the water, he is winning the fights comfortably, and it's not really a question that he won the decision. So Belal, remember the decision I have at the number 8 spot. Let's get on to the number 7 spot, where I have Tom Aspinall. Yes, I have Tom Aspinall above Belal Muhammad, just because the sheer amount of finishes. And so what Tom Aspinall lacks for against Belal in the level of competition, the finish rate and the finishes. This guy has a 2 minute and 2 second average fight time. Completely destroyed Sergey Pavlovich, who was on a 6-fight win streak at the time, the scariest heavyweight in the division. Destroyed him. Destroyed Curtis Blaydes in the rematch. Showed the first fight was a fluke. Destroyed Alexander Volkov. Took him down and submitted him. Nobody else did that to Volkov. Destroyed Marcin Tybur in a minute when he came back on his return. Destroyed Andrei Arlovski when everybody else back in the day took him to a decision. Fair enough, it's Andrei Arlovski. I shouldn't even be pointing that out. But yeah, Tom Aspinall, interim champion, defended his interim belt. And yeah, man, just the dominance and the finishing ability. I have him slightly above Belal. You could argue that Belal's faced better competition. He has. But Tom Aspinall has been more impressive, way more impressive. And he's finishing guys in record time. So that cannot be understated. So for me, personally, I have Tom Aspinall above Belal at number 7. Coming in at the number 6 spot, I have Alessandro Pantoja. Just outside the top 5. I think if he wins his fight against Kai French, you could argue for top 5, depending on how the other fighters above him go. But the only thing holding back Pantoja, in my opinion, he is 10-0 against the top 10 of his division, but the level of competition at flyweight is very weak. And he's been, I know you guys are thinking that he finished, who was it that he finished? He finished Kai Asakura, but outside of that, man, he's kind of been a decision merchant in the last couple of years outside of that finish. Decision against Roy Val, kind of smudge grappled him. Decision against Brandon Moreno, and some more decisions I forget about. But yeah, Alessandro Pantoja, and he went life and death with Steve Erceg. There's a narrative around him that he's just like completely dog walking everybody he fights, and it's just not true, man. He had a split decision against Brandon Moreno, a split decision against Steve Erceg. Sure, he ran through Kai Asakura, but Kai Asakura was he was debuting, you know. And it's like, although Pantoja's a great champion, he's not absolutely blowing guys out of the water like people say he is, and the level of competition isn't that great. With that being said, I still have him above Belal and Aspinall just because of the run he's on, and the guys he beat are pretty impressive. He also has 2 more, they're not okay, I know I just said he faced weak competition. The guys he beat are decent, you know? And he has 2 more title defenses than Bilal Muhammad. I think he has a longer win streak. So, yeah. No, not a longer win streak. He's 2 more title defenses. And, yeah, man, he's running out of contenders at flyweight. So, Bilal is not running out of contenders. So, I think he's cleared out his division more than Bilal has. So, that, for me, slightly puts him against over Bilal and Tom Aspinall. Let's get on to the number 5 spot where I have Merab Dvalishvili. Now, I know I said Tom Aspinall is number 7 because of he finishes fights. But what Merab lacks for in finishing ability, he makes up for in making his opponents look silly and just cardio mogging them and dominating them in the latter rounds. Like, yeah, you're going to have close rounds with Merab, but he's most likely going to beat the crap out of you in rounds 3, 4, and 5. Except if you're O'Malley. O'Malley won the 5th round, but he made O'Malley look silly a lot of their fights. Sure, it was a close fight. You could argue 48-47, but he did make O'Malley look silly when everybody else on the feet gets destroyed by O'Malley. He just cardio mogged and outworked Umar in the last 3 rounds and made him look silly in the wrestling department in moments. Before that, he absolutely dominated and destroyed Petr Yan. No one's ever done that to Petr Yan. And then he destroyed Jose Aldo. Not destroyed. He kind of just held him up against the fence and couldn't really do much, to be fair. He destroyed Henry Cejudo, actually, as well. He has a win over, who else is it? Before the Cejudo fight. I forget, but yeah. Merab, the level of competition, the amount of former champions he's ran through, and just the streak he's on. The longest win streak in bantamweight history at 11, I believe. Just defended his belt for the first time. 4 former champions in a row I think he beat. So, yeah, for me, Merab, the dominance and the level of competition he's beat has him in my top 5 personally. Let's get on to the number 4 spot where I have Dricus du Plessis. I have Dricus over Merab just because of finishing ability and level of competition is similar somewhat, but I think Merab's level of competition is a little bit better, but Dricus is out there finishing guys outside of Sean Strickland. So he beats Sean Strickland, who was a champion, right? Very close fight. Could have won either way. He got that decision. But before that, he finished Adesanya in the grappling, which nobody else has been able to do in the UFC. He finished Robert Whittaker, which was he was the first guy to finish Robert Whittaker since Izzy. Very impressive at the time. Who else did he beat? So he has a win over Adesanya, Whittaker, Strickland, 3 former champions back to back to back. And before that, he beat a good journeyman like Derek Brunson. He beat guys like Darren Till, which I know it's Darren Till, but it was a good win. It was a decent win at the time, I'd say. And yeah, man, Dricus is carving out one of the most impressive, underrated resumes in the UFC. He's also undefeated in the UFC. He's 8-0. 1 title defense under his belt. No, hadn't defended it yet. Yeah, yes, he defended the belt against Adesanya. 1 title defense. Undefeated in the UFC. I think he finished all of his UFC fights outside of the Strickland fights. So for me, 3 former champions in a row. And yeah, for me, Strickland, I have him at the number 4 spot. And if he beats Strickland again, he might go up to number 3 for me. It just depends how it plays out. I think he'll stay at number 4, though, depending on how he beats Strickland. Like, if he just blows Strickland out of the water, I might have to move him up because it's really hard to destroy Sean Strickland and finish him unless you're Alex Pereira. Speaking of the man himself, Alex Pereira Poatan, I have the number 3 spot. When it comes to activity, this man is unmatched. He just broke the record for the fastest time to get 3 title defenses in the UFC. Modern UFC history had like 170-something days. It was crazy. He got 3 title defenses. The thing that Alex Pereira lacks in is level of competition. You could argue that his last 2 wins are 2 wins before Khalil Roundtree against former champions in Yuri and Jamal Hill, but I don't think Jamal Hill is all that great. He's on a 2-fight losing streak now. I don't think Jamal Hill was ever really championship material. He kind of got gifted a fight with a 43-year-old Glover coming off a war, and then, you know, people showered him with praise way more than they should have. So I don't think a Jamal Hill win is all that in a bag of chips, if you get what I'm saying. And a Yuri win is great because Yuri's only lost to Pereira, so that's great. But I don't think Khalil Roundtree does much. And he had a really close fight with, who was it, Jan Blachowicz. So, and he got KO'd by Izzy when he left middleweight. So for me, sure, you could look at the dominance he's pouring on right now in the activity and put him at number 2 or 1, but I think the guys above him are just as dominant and beating better fighters. So yeah, I have Alex Pereira at my number 3 spot. And I'm not going to lie, I'm favoring well-roundedness and just being all around like a great finisher. I'm favoring that number 2 and number 1 because Ilia Topuria for me is number 2. There's something to be said about if this guy doesn't finish you, he will beat you pillar to post. Look what happened in the Josh Emmett fight. That was arguably a 50-42. He beat the brakes off of Josh Emmett. That was like almost hard to watch. It looks like Josh Emmett's face was left in a blender. Then first guy to KO Max Holloway. No one else has ever done that. First guy to be Volkanovski at featherweight, KO'd him. Is on a he's the only guy. He submitted Bryce Mitchell in the UFC, who's an underrated grappler in his own right. I know it's funny to laugh at Bryce Mitchell, haha, but Bryce Mitchell has some of the best grappling outside of Ilia Topuria in the featherweight division. Submitted him and knocked him down before submitting him, I believe. And yeah, beats Yusuf Zalal before that, who's on like a 6-fight win streak now. So Ilia Topuria, just the fact that he KO'd Volkan Max back-to-back is one of the most insane back-to-back KOs you could ever come across. The fact that this guy has wrestling in his back pocket. He has submissions. He came up as a grappler. He's arguably the greatest boxer we've ever seen in the UFC. And he's finishing guys like Max Holloway who've never been finished. So for me, Ilia Topuria has been extremely dominant as of recent. His last 3 fights, he absolutely ran through him. I mean, he didn't really run through Max Holloway. It was a scrappy fight. And Volkanovski was getting the better of him in some exchanges. But when I say ran through him, I mean he KO'd him out cold. I mean, he beat him definitively. That's it. It's not like he was getting destroyed in those fights, you know. So for me, the level of competition and the finishes for Ilia Topuria and how well-rounded he is has him at number 2. And number 1, it's very obvious. It's going to be Islam Makhachev. Islam has finished 8 of his 9 last opponents. The only time he didn't finish his opponent in his last 9 fights was the Volkanovski 1 fight. And then the rematch, when Volk took it on short notice, he got him with a head kick. Just finished Moicano, finished Poirier, finished Bobby Green, finished Dan Hooker, finished Charles Oliveira. Who else? We can keep going. I forget the rest. But yeah, I mean, Islam's just finishing guys left and right. Wherever the fight goes, this guy's dangerous. He's outstriking guys like Dustin Poirier in moments. He's outstriking guys like Volkanovski in moments, who's one of the best kickboxers / boxers in the sport. Easily beat Moicano. Listen, I know it was Moicano on short notice, but Moicano had a full training camp, and Islam made him look like he never grappled a day in his life. That was very impressive for him to do. One of the only guys to beat Arman Tsarukyan in the UFC, who's one of the best fighters in the lightweight division. It's very hard to be at the top in lightweight. Submitted the submission king in Charles Oliveira. Just the dominance and the level of competition and how well-rounded this guy is. He's beaten 2 fighters on his win streak in the pound-for-pound rankings. Number 1 pound for pound at the time was Alexander Volkanovski. I think Charles was like number 3 or 4 pound for pound whenever he beat him. So, and he ended Charles's 11-fight win streak, and he ended Volkanovski's like 13-fight win streak in the UFC. And it's like, yeah, man, nobody right now is topping Islam until he loses, or I don't know. I honestly, if Islam doesn't lose, I don't see anybody passing him in the pound for pound rankings until he retires. He's just too dominant. If he gets one more win, he passes Anderson Silva's record for the longest win streak in UFC history at 16. So yeah, that's ultimately my pound for pound rankings. Personally, yes, I left Leon Edwards out. Go ahead and hate in the comments. You probably could maybe argue and knock Strickland down and put Leon Edwards up there, but I don't know, man. This is gonna sound crazy, but I don't rate that that second Usman win all that much. I mean, wobbly cobbly stone Usman cutting down the welterweight at 37 years old. Usman hasn't won a fight since 2021, so it's like, how good was that second Usman win really for Leon Edwards? And he just got dunked on his head and made look like a clown against Bilal, and he's inactive. So for me, inactivity does push you down in the pound for pound rankings. I'm not going to act like it doesn't. But yeah, this is my pound for pound rankings. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Who's better, mine or the UFC's, or do you have a better pound for pound list? Drop it in the comments. I appreciate you guys watching as always. Drop a like on the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'm out.